Fifth chapter, exhortation to wisdom, content, liberality and chastity. My son, attend unto my wisdom, and bow thine ear to my understanding, that thou mayst regard discretion, and that thy lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as an honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. That's talking about Caucasian people there. And discretion is authority with your own judgment, righteous judgment and authority. But her end, talking about colored people, is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps take hold on hell. That's talking about Caucasian people. Lest thou shouldest ponder the path of life. Her ways are movable, that thou cannot know them. Hear me now, therefore, O ye children, and depart not from the words of my mouth. Remove thy way far from her, and come not near the door of her house, lest thou give thy honor unto others, and thy years unto the cruel. Let strangers be filled with thy wealth, and thy labors be in the house of a stranger. And thou mourn at the last, when thy flesh and thy body are consumed, and say, how have I hated instruction, and my heart despised reproof, and have not obeyed the voice of my teachers, nor inclined mine ear to them that instructed me. I was almost in all evil in the midst of the congregation and assembly. Drink waters out of thine own cistern, and running waters out of thine own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad, and rivers of waters in the street. Let them be only thine own, and not strangers with thee. Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as the loving hind and pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love. And why wilt thou, my son, be ravished with a strange woman, and embrace the bosom of a stranger? For the ways of man on before are before the eyes of the Lord, and he punneth all his goings. His own iniquity shall take the wicked himself, and he shall be holden with the cords of his sins. He shall die without instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he shall go astray. That was the King James Version. Now I'm going to read Vulgate. This is the Latin version that was translated from Latin to English. This is the Catholic. This is what the Catholic really use. My son, attend unto my wisdom, and incline thine ear to my prudence, that thou mayst keep thoughts, and thy lips may preserve instruction. Mind not the deceit of a woman, for the lips of a harlot. Now let's say about a harlot. Are like a honeycomb. The lips of a harlot are like a honeycomb, dropping, and her throat is smoother than oil. But her end is bitter as wormwood, and sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down into death, and her steps go in as far as hell. They walk not by the path of life. Her steps are wandering and unaccountable. Now, therefore, my son, hear me and depart not from the words of my mouth. Remove thy way far from her, and come not near the doors of her house. Give not thy honor to strangers, and thy years to the cruel. Let strangers be filled with thy strength, and thy labors be in another man's house. And thou mournest at the last, when thou shalt have spent thy flesh and thy body, and say, why have I hated instruction, and my heart consent not to reprove, and have not heard the voice of them that taught me, and have not inclined my ear to masters. I have almost been in all evil in the midst of the church and of the congregation. Now, this is the Catholic Church saying, drink water out of thy own cistern and the stream of thy own well. Let thy fountains be conveyed abroad, and in the streets divide thy waters. Keep them to thyself alone, neither let strangers be partakers with thee. Let thy vein be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let it be thy dearest hind, and most agreeable fawn. Let her breast inebriate thee at all times. Be thou delighted continually with her love. Why art thou seduced, my son, by a strange woman, this Caucasian woman now, and art cherished in the bosom of another? The Lord beholdeth the ways of man, and considereth all his steps. His own iniquities catch the wicked, and he is fast bound with the ropes of his own sins. He shall die because he hath not received instruction, and in the multitude of his folly he shall be deceived. That was the vocate. That's what the Catholic use. The vocate. Now the Wycliffe. Let's go on out now. The Wycliffe edition. The Wycliffe Bible, which was printed before the King James, said, my son, receive thou my wisdom and bow down thine ear to my prudence. He said, my son, pay attention to my wisdom and listen to my understanding of things. Prudence is like understanding. So that thou keep thy thoughts proper, and thy lips keep teaching, and thy lips speak nobly. Give thou not attention to the falseness of a woman, for the lips of a whore be a honeycomb dropping, or a whore's lips be like a dripping honeycomb, and her throat is clearer than oil. But the last things of her be as bitter as wormwood, and her tongue is as sharp as a sword, carving or cutting on each side. Her feet go down into death, and her steps pierce to hells. Her feet go downward unto death, and her steps shall lead thee unto Sheol, or the land of the dead, and her steps shall lead thee to hell. Those go not by the path of life. Her steps be uncertain, and may not be sought out. They do not go on the path of life. Her steps be uncertain, and should not be followed. Now therefore, my son, hear thou me. And so now, my son, listen to me, and go thou not away from the words of my mouth. Make far thy way from her. Make thy way far away from her, and nigh thou not to the doors of her house. Give thou not thine honor to aliens. Give thou not thy honor to strangers, and thy years to the cruel. Lest peradventure strangers be filled with thy strength, and lest the rewards of thy travails be in an alien house. Lest perhaps strangers shall take all thy wealth, and the rewards of all thy efforts be in someone else's house. And thou shalt be revealed in the last days, when thou have wasted thy flesh and thy body, and say, why loath I teach it, and my heart assented not to blaming. And thou say, why did I loathe discipline? And why did I not listen to rebukes? Neither I heard the voice of men teaching me, and I bowed not down my ear to masters. Almost I was in all evil in the midst of the church and of the synagogue. I was almost uniformly despised in the midst of the congregation and among those in the assembly. Drink thou waters of thy cistern, and the floods of thy well. Drink thou water from thy own cistern, and outflowings from thy own well. Thy well be stream forth, and pour thy waters in streets. Let thy well flow forth, and let thy water be parted in the streets. Have thou alone them, and aliens be not thy partners. Have thou them alone, and let not strangers be thy partners. Thou vein be blessed, let thy fountains be blessed. And be thou glad with the woman of thy young waxen age. And Hine, most dear worthy, and a hard calf, most acceptable. Her teats fill thee in all times, and delight thou continually in the love of her. She is like a most dear worthy deer, the most acceptable hard calf. Let her breast fulfill or satisfy thee at all times, and delight thou continually in her love. My son, why art thou deceived of the alien woman, and art fostered in the bosom of another? My son, why art thou deceived by a strange or an unknown woman? And why art thou comfort in the bosom of another? The Lord sees the ways of a man, and beholds all his steps. The wickedness of a wicked man take hold of him, and he is bound with the ropes of his sins. He shall die, for he is not learning. He shall die, for he has no discipline, and he shall be deceived in the muchness of his folly. Okay, so that was Proverbs. Is three different versions of Proverbs. I read the King James version and Wycliffe version and the Vulgate. Now I got this. I'm ahead. You wondering what that is? That's the lavender stone, higher consciousness. So it'll tell you, love your wife. Not only say the woman, that is strange women, also Caucasians. Tell you to stay far from them, or even a whore, stay far away.